Welcome to the Weekly Defence Podcast, the show about defence procurement and military technology. We're brought to you in partnership with our sponsor Nammo, and I'm your host, Beth Maundrill. On the show this week, we hear from Gordon Arthur, our Asia-Pacific editor, and his recent visit to Beijing in China, where the country put on its largest ever military parade through Tiananmen Square. And we speak to Leonardo about his AW149 helicopter and other rotorcraft pursuits currently underway. But first, our weekly news roundup, and I'm joined by Tim Martin and Richard Thomas.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Beth.
And this week, we're going to be covering all the Ps, procurement programs, pirates, and partnerships. And as myself and Tim prepare for AUSA, the US Army's largest conference in Washington, D.C., I've got some news from that side of the pond. So the US Army has been on its way to develop what it's calling the optionally manned fighting vehicle to replace the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And this has come into the news recently because as it moves to the next stage of the programme, it seems that there is now only one single industry participant as part of a competition.
So if you've got one participant left as part of a competition, shouldn't it just be awarded at this point?
No, so the Army's going to continue, it seems, with testing, development, looking into this vehicle, which is going to be the General Dynamics Land Systems offering after BAE Systems pulled its CV-90 out of the running earlier this year, and it was recently reported by trade press that the Rheinmetall Raytheon offering of the Lynx KF-41 was disqualified from the competition.
I mean, the Bradley's been around for, ages. It was one of the first model armoured fighting vehicles that I made, which obviously shows its age and mine as well. But I mean, how crucial is it that the US Army needs to get a replacement for this vehicle?
Well, I mean, pretty crucial. They do. I mean, as with any platform, it can't go on forever. And with the changing threat environment, obviously, there are new requirements every day. There's only so much you can actually upgrade platforms. Notably, this week, BAE Systems was awarded quite a significant contract to upgrade the Bradley vehicles, obviously separate from the optionally manned fighting vehicle programme. But what is interesting is that the Rheinmetall disqualification had seemed to lean on the fact that the company was unable to get the Lynx, of which it has one vehicle at the moment, over to the US in time for the October 1st deadline. Now, this has been disputed a little bit by commentators. We've got a great story on the website from one of our contributors based in DC who spoke to a number of sources from the Pentagon and elsewhere on the programme who have kind of questioned this as the reason for the Lynx not making the programme. One commentator saying that indeed Angela Merkel would have given the vehicle a piggyback ride to the port if it meant that a German company might get a share of this big US contract. So obviously there's questions over this disqualification of Rheinmetall. There's also questions over how cost effective and how legitimate it is to have a competition with only one platform being examined in it. The problem that we're going to have now, though, is it's in the source selection phase, and typically the US Army and anyone involved in the competition at this phase will batten down the hatches and they don't really say much. So they're all very open and happy to talk during the requirement phase and demonstrations and stuff like that. But when it comes to source selection, they're quite quiet. So while we will be looking into this next week at AUSA, we're not really sure what we'll be able to get. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. And as I mentioned, a great piece from our US contributor on the website. But moving over to the seas, Richard, piracy. You've done a bit of an investigative piece into the Somali pirate situation.
Yeah, that's right. I've spent a while digging into it. Just to give you a bit of background. So in May this year, the high-risk area, which is an industry-created zone through which shipping has to or should really undertake what's known as best maritime practices. These are sort of tactics and procedures to lessen the chance of pirates successfully pirating the vessel. So this zone was reduced on the 1st of May.
So that's a good sign.
You'd think so. We looked into as to whether it's been reduced because of a reduction in piracy threats. Industry that we spoke to, these are private maritime security contractors. They're watching and waiting. They are reporting a significant drop-off in the number of business cases that they have. There used to be 8 British firms who were licensed to operate vessel-based armories at sea, and this is reduced now to 4 in the region. So you're seeing a lot of businesses go out of business because of a perceived drop-off in piracy threats. But whether the threat still remains, that's the contention.
Yeah, because obviously with the support of these like private contractors and stuff, that's kind of helped keep the threat at bay, surely. So if you just get rid of them, you could end up...
Yeah, sure.
Pirates could see, well, there's a gap in the security of this region now because there's less focus on it.
No vessel with armed guards on board has ever been pirated. Been lots of attacks, and pirates have obviously failed. The problem is if you dismantle this infrastructure that's been set up over the past decade to create a safe area and safe conditions for shipping to transit. If you dismantle all this infrastructure, then you're only going to have to make it back again. You're only going to have to start from scratch should a pirate successfully pirate a ship transiting the area. I mean, it'll only take one instance of a ransom being paid, and the former pirates turned smugglers will revert back to their previous profession and start applying their trade in the Indian Ocean again. Absolutely.
Yeah. Something definitely to keep our eyes on, and obviously your piece can be found on the website.
Yep.
Tim, fast jets, pointy aircraft. What's going on? We're looking to the future a little bit.
Yes, we are. So this week, focus from the Armaments is on FCAS fighter program with news from Dassault and Airbus, who are the manufacturing heavyweights for the program. Effectively issuing some pressure on the German and French governments to issue them with a demonstrator phase contract.
Okay.
So this would be an important step on the program as a whole, and give industry opportunity to investigate how they would look at some of the key technologies that FCAS would eventually field. Now, we are talking about a program here. We must remember that isn't expected to enter service until 2040.
But it seems like they want to get things going then. And there was a lot of news out of the Paris Air Show about this. They did a lot of presentation of the new aircraft mock-up, and VIPs were there unveiling things and partnerships and all that good stuff. So it seems like they're like, right, now put your money where your mouth is, give us a contract.
That's exactly right. As you mentioned, Paris Air Show at Le Bourget, we remember President Macron making his way to the stage as the aircraft was unveiled for the first time. Yeah. The concept, we should say, rather wasn't actually a flyable aircraft at that stage. We're fast forward a couple of months, and we're left with industry kind of frustrated at the pace of the program, and I think not being issued with this contract is quite significant because it's an unusual step for two manufacturers to make a joint statement. And I suppose beyond kind of what it represents, it does seem that France and Germany are going to have to come out and explain themselves for this one, and why a contract hasn't been issued at this stage.
Is it just France and Germany that's involved in the programme then?
No, so Spain have been added to it. I remember at Paris Air Show that was one of the other announcements. But yeah, France and Germany have always been the initial two government leaders for the programme. But I think what's interesting is that so far there's been no explanation from France and Germany as to why the contract hasn't been issued. So it remains to be seen, when it will be handed out. And also, I think what's kind of beyond kind of this development, that the programme previously has witnessed Airbus criticise Madrid's decision to select Indra, the electronics manufacturer, as its preferred choice to lead the Spanish share of FCAS industry work. And I just flagged that point really to kind of suggest that these partnerships are already becoming quite complicated.
Yeah.
And, we see political allegiances, playing their part. And, when you consider the fact that we're more than 20 years away from the thing entering service, and even it doesn't seem that there's any firm kind of solid basis for the partnerships. One wants to kind of criticise the other, and that. We know that that's kind of almost, it's a familiar part of these consortium-based programmes, but I do think that there's becoming increasing level of criticism, particularly with the FCAS programme, and not to say that it is in any way inferior to Tempest and what's going on with that rival competition, but having heard from people and having heard from kind of industry figures and from the RAF at the SAI, which was spoken about previously, there does seem to be a bit more of a coherent approach and everyone kind of singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah. I'm guessing it's because with Tempest, you've got one country taking the lead as well. So you've got an obvious leader rather than it being a partnership and yada yada, that makes it a little bit more complicated inherently because someone always wants to be on top.
Yeah, certainly. Now, I think I would also kind of mention that there hasn't been any mention from Tempest of a demonstrator programme, so that's kind of one to maybe ask of the RAF and those who are leading that programme as well. But I do know that there's a business case from the MOD that's going to be put forward by Tempest next year, and then a final business case in 2025. So, but even talking about that, it's very clear. Here's the timelines. Here's the things that we want to make happen. Whereas you're left with kind of an underlying feeling with FCAS that these difficulties are happening because there's no clear direction from the programme, or that France and Germany are, I suppose, not helping the situation by, not delivering what was expected, i.e. these the demonstrator contract.
Yeah, these, as you said, these consortium programmes often come with a lot of rivalries and issues in them. Well, thank you for that again this week, team. For more information on all these stories, links will be included in the show notes, or have a look at the Shephard Media website. Coming up on the podcast, we speak to Tony Duthie, Head of Helicopters, Land and Maritime Marketing at Leonardo. But first, we hear from Gordon Arthur about his recent visit to Beijing to witness the missiles, UAVs and EW equipment on parade through Tiananmen Square. If you're a fan of the Weekly Defence podcast, then you're going to love our new podcast series on Five Eyes connectivity. Over the course of 3 episodes, we look at the changing face of modern warfare, looking into 3 key technology areas: satellite communications, line-of-sight data links, and cybersecurity. And we find out about the vulnerabilities facing military connectivity, hearing how full access to the electromagnetic spectrum can no longer be taken for granted. Sponsored by Viasat, the Five Eyes Connectivity podcast also looks at how the private sector is stepping in to help militaries develop these technology areas further. Our new podcast special series is available now, so just search for Five Eyes Connectivity wherever you get your podcasts, or head to the Shephard Media website. On the 1st of October, China put on one of its largest ever military parades through Tiananmen Square. This was in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the founding of what is the modern-day People's Republic of China. This also represents 70 years of Communist Party rule in the country. We had our man on the ground, Gordon Arthur, our Asia-Pacific editor, who's joined me to chat through some of the equipment that he saw during the parade and kind of why that's important to the People Liberation Army in China. So, Gordon, missiles were maybe the big thing there, not just in size, but in quantity, different types. So why is that something that they're looking to showcase so much and something they're developing?
Yeah, you're right. I was the man on the ground, and I was just very lucky not to be run over by one of these missile launches because they were coming at us from all directions. It was absolutely phenomenal. It was the largest ever parade put on by the Chinese. 15,000 troops, nearly 500 or so vehicles. It was huge. But the thing that probably most people took away was the sheer number of intercontinental ballistic missiles that appeared in the parade. So we didn't have just one type or two types or three. We had 4 different ICBMs appearing in the parade. So no country has ever shown that kind of number before. So what were the 4 types? The JL-2, which is a submarine-launched ballistic missile, that appeared for the first time. It's been in service on the Chinese Jin-class SSBNs for a number of years, but it's never been shown in public. So we had 12 of those roll past on Tiananmen Square. And we also had the DF-5B, which is a silo-launched ICBM that was shown 4 years ago in the Beijing parade as well. And attracting the most attention were 2 brand new ICBMs that haven't been shown to the public before. One of them is the DF-31AG, which is the latest version of the DF-31 family. And the most exciting for observers and analysts was the DF-41. So this is an absolutely phenomenally big missile. It's carried on a 16 by 16 transporter erector launcher, and it has the ability to reach the United States. And speaking of which, I think that was pretty much the message, the signal that China was sending, that it has the ability to launch nuclear missiles at any threat anywhere around the world. And I think if you compare previous parades, there were short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles. This year, there weren't any. It was pretty much ICBMs and other missile types. So China is sending quite a coercive message to the world and to the United States, because we know there's a lot of tensions between these two largest countries in the world.
Yeah, so obviously you filed a story with some great images where our listeners can take a look at what these DF-41s on their 16 by 16 trucks look like. One question though, Gordon, with all this equipment being paraded through the streets, is it stuff that actually like works, or is it kind of a bit of a show of like, oh, here we've got some stuff, but whether it's actually usable, or is it something that they could launch tomorrow kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, most of these missiles, they're just showing the canisters in which they'll be launched. So they would have been empty, of course. They're not going to put live missiles in the parade. But the thing is, anything that appears in one of these PLA parades, it signifies that it has entered operational service.
Okay.
So yeah, it's sort of, if it appears in the parade, it's confirmation that it is in service. It may only have recently been inducted, but it will be operational. And just to mention perhaps 2 other missile types that did appear in the parade that we didn't really know much about beforehand. One of them was the DF-17. Now, the remarkable thing about this one, it carries a hypersonic glide vehicle, which travels at extremely high velocities. It can change its trajectory. And so, of course, that kind of missile traveling at phenomenal speeds it's very difficult for any kind of air defense to counter it. So that was one pretty exciting missile to see, and no other country that we know of has operationalized a hypersonic glide vehicle before. Now, one other new missile that was brand new is called the DF-100. It's a supersonic cruise missile. It's propelled by ramjets. We're not sure of the speed, but it likely performs anti-ship and land attack functions. Just looking at the launcher truck that it was on and the size of the canisters, it's a large missile. So, yeah, a range in excess of 1,500 kilometers, perhaps 2,000. We're not quite sure yet.
But it wasn't just all about the missiles. Obviously, they were a very dominating factor there at the parade. There was also new unmanned equipment, unmanned aerial vehicles, right?
Correct. There was a whole heap of new stuff, and there were a couple of formations dedicated to unmanned technology. Now, around the world today, China is selling a large number of UAVs and unmanned combat aerial vehicles, particularly places in the Middle East, Central Asia, North Africa. A number of countries are using those. So it's a whole area that China is focusing on: artificial intelligence, unmanned technology, and again, China has managed to surprise the world by the level of technology and the type of UAVs that it's introducing. So perhaps I can just pick out two of them to give our listeners a brief description. One of them is called the WZ-8. Now, this is a pretty sleek-looking UAV. It looks like perhaps it comes from the Thunderbirds or something like that. So this is a supersonic high-altitude UAV, and photos that I took of the aircraft, the WZ-8, it has some sort of hooks on the top. So that seems to suggest it would be dropped or launched from an H-6 bomber. And then the UAV, perhaps it's rocket propelled, it would go off and perform sort of ISR functions, perhaps identifying, locating US Navy warships operating in the Western Pacific. It can transmit that information back to the PLA. So that's a very important new aircraft for the PLA.
From the images as well, it looks like it's quite a large solution as well.
Yeah, it's sleek, it's long, it's narrow, it looks the part. So we can't say much about its performance or its capability because we just don't know.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, if it appeared in the parade, it would seem to have entered service.
Mm-hmm.
The other UAV that I did want to mention is called the GJ-11. We used to know it as the sharp sword. Now, this one is a blended wing design, and it's actually a UCAV, so an unmanned combat aerial vehicle. It could carry precision-guided weapons. So that was another new one as well. And while we're talking about unmanned technology, would you like to hear about one of the autonomous underwater vehicles that China had on show as well?
Well, with the news continuing to unfold about the South China Sea and Chinese operations there, I think it would be amiss if we didn't mention some water vehicles.
Right. Well, I can tell you something about it then.
Brilliant.
It's sort of like I guess it looks like a mini submarine. So the Chinese are calling it the U-001. Now, this one, it's again, it fitted on the back of a truck. There were two examples shown. It seems to have a sonar sensor on the front. It has a mast-mounted sonar, and we're just not sure what it would be used for or how it would be used. One suggestion, perhaps it could be mounted on the deck of a submarine, and then while the submarine's off doing its mission underwater, it could release one of these AUVs. Perhaps the AUV could go off and sort of do a screening mission looking for enemy submarines. Perhaps the AUV could lay mines. Perhaps it could deploy other smaller unmanned underwater vehicles as well. Or perhaps it's just an ISR platform. So there's many great mysteries about this particular submarine. It has twin screws on the back. It has fore and aft thrusters. So again, China's sort of taken everyone by surprise at the pace at which it's introduced some of these new high-tech weapons and systems.
Yeah, it's definitely, they're not holding back with the level of technology that they're kind of demonstrating. It's not something that is being taken lightly. They're definitely like pursuing those high-end tech things. So
absolutely, and that's they're investing and spending an incredible amount of money on these new weapon systems as well.
Yeah, because obviously, like you said about the size of the parade in your introduction, really. So do you think they're moving towards more of a quality over quantity, or also keeping up that quantity of like personnel and equipment, but also focusing on doing these high-tech things?
Yeah, I mean, if you recall, 4 years ago at the last public parade in Beijing, President Xi Jinping announced that he was going to cut 300,000 troops from the PLA, so reducing it from 2.3 million down to 2 million. Maybe not a popular thing to announce at the PLA's sort of special parade, but since that time, the number has been cut. The PLA is becoming more streamlined, a lot leaner, a lot meaner, and certainly the modernization of the PLA is in full swing.
And finally, then, there was, as well as the missiles, the UAVs, there was some specialist electronic warfare equipment on display as well, which we've seen kind of cropping up elsewhere in the Southeast Asia Pacific region. But why is this significant for China to be demonstrating their electronic warfare capabilities?
As part of the restructuring of the PLA, China introduced what was called the Strategic Support Force. So that's responsible for all the cyber realm, electronic warfare, sort of satellite space type technologies as well. So the Strategic Support Force, it has a number of assets used to support other services within the PLA. And we counted, there are actually 4 formations in the parade dedicated to information warfare. So it's obviously something that China wanted to highlight and emphasize, that it is making advances and progress in this particular area. And just looking at some of the vehicles that took part, I mean, there were armored vehicles just festooned with all sorts of antennas and masts and sensors, and I mean, one could only hazard a guess as to what they're all used for. So jamming and communications and so on. So that's certainly a major area for China. And perhaps I can just finish off by giving you a quick wrap up on a few of the land systems that were there as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
So the Type 15 light tank, that was the first time for it to appear in a parade. So this particular tank, perhaps 35 tons. We know it's been deployed in southern China and also in the Tibet area near the Indian border. So that's an important tank for the PLA. Also, there was 2 new artillery pieces of equipment. One is the PLC 181, which is actually a truck-mounted self-propelled howitzer, 155 millimeter gun. We know and can confirm that also has been deployed to Tibet, likely elsewhere as well. And one other piece of equipment appearing for the first time was a multiple launch rocket system. We don't really know the correct name for it yet. Some people are calling it the Type 16, but probably this rocket launcher has a range of somewhere in the order of 280 kilometers, so greater than the range of the PHL-03 that the PLA already has, but a little bit less than a short-range ballistic missile. And perhaps one other important vehicle, the HQ-17A, which is a surface-to-air missile. Now, the Chinese actually copied the Russian Tor M1 surface-to-air missile system previously and put that on a tracked chassis. So the HQ-17A is actually a progression from that. So instead of a tracked chassis, it's on a 6x6 wheeled platform. And obviously, this kind of weapon system, it's good for urban areas, it's good for rapid movement, for mobility on roads. So that again is something that China has been emphasizing, its ability to move units rapidly around the country and perhaps even outside its borders, who knows.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Gordon, and going through all that equipment. I mean, there's just so much of it to kind of get your teeth into, so much new equipment as well. I think in your story you said about 40% of what they showed was new equipment.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, and if you consider that the last parade was only 4 years ago,
that's a lot. Yeah.
40% in 4 years is brand new. It just shows the sheer scale of investment that China is putting in. So that has many people concerned, of course. Why does China need to invest so much in its military? That's the question that many people are asking.
Well, I mean, we know that the US Army in its modernization efforts at the moment is putting China and Russia as the two top adversaries that it will be facing in the future. So I'm sure a lot of people are looking on this with quite a lot of questions. But for our listeners, we can direct you to the Shephard Media website where Gordon's story has been posted. It will also be in the show notes. And Gordon, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you on your next adventure.
Yeah, perhaps 5 years later at the next parade in Beijing.
Well, hopefully we'll hear from you again before that.
All right, thanks, Beth.
While the podcast is a newer venture for Shephard Media, we've actually been in the defence publishing business for almost 40 years and have built up a strong and loyal audience base. Our content is trusted and consumed by key decision makers through Shephard Media's multiple channels. One benefit of having such a dedicated audience base is our ability to offer a comprehensive range of message delivery options to our advertisers. From brand awareness campaigns across a combination of print and digital media, through targeted email campaigns or show dailies, to a multitude of online opportunities, or even advertising opportunities within the podcast itself. If you'd like to know more, please visit shephardmedia.com/advertising.
So I'm here at DSCI 2019. I'm at the Leonardo stand, where pride of place of their exhibit is the AW149 multi-role helicopter. I'm speaking with Tony Duthie, who's the head of land and maritime marketing. Just to start off with, I mean, perhaps we could start with the AW149, since we're standing sort of right next to the aircraft. I can't recall Leonardo ever having a helicopter in such a prominent display at DSCI itself. Why is the AW149 here, and why is it being displayed so prominently?
Okay, so the AW149 is our latest generation multi-motion battlefield helicopter. It's been designed for the international and domestic markets. And DSCI is the world's premier defence and security exhibition, so it makes sense for us to showcase this platform at this prestigious event.
And what kind of requirements are you looking at in particular? You know, what sort of what can you talk about in terms of the marketing efforts?
The aircraft's designed specifically to undertake a wide variety of battlefield roles, such as troop transport, cargo resupply, casualty evacuation, medical evacuation, special forces insertion and extraction, and search and rescue and combat search and rescue. So it's a true multi-mission requirement. So any customer that has got that broad set of mission sets, either in the battlefield or the maritime environment, the 149 is extremely well placed to meet those requirements.
And I mean, you've had some sales success to date. I mean, I think, has Thailand purchased some of the aircraft?
We don't normally state which countries have purchased the 149, but yes, we have sold the 149.
to more than one customer?
Conversations are ongoing with multiple customers around the world in terms of the 149. There's a lot of interest in the platform in terms of its capabilities, its cost effectiveness, its safety, its survivability. So we're engaged with a wide set of customers around the world.
I guess I'm just going to try now and ask the same question in a different direction in terms of the international sales. Is the aircraft in production at this point?
The AW149 is part of the same family that the AW189, the commercial aircraft, comes from. Right. They share the same common lineage, so they come from the same family. And so we have a hot production line for this family of aircraft. It's a dual-use platform, so we're able to leverage the production volumes and rates associated with the commercial brother of the 149. And so therefore we can actually offer very attractive lead times to military customers.
Okay, and that production line's the one in Italy,
yes,
I guess.
It is, yeah.
And how many troops are we talking about in terms of this is set up as a troop transport configuration? How many fully equipped troops could it carry?
The aircraft on display here is in a trooping configuration that will carry 12 fully equipped, fully laden troops. The amount of kit that troops now have to carry with them into the battlefield is quite significant. So although in a high density configuration we can actually seat up to 16, this aircraft is on display here with 12 seats, and that includes 2 seats for crew serve gunners for use of general purpose machine guns to lay down suppressive fire.
Great. Well, moving on from the 149 perhaps, the Wildcat's out on dockside. Yeah, I guess it's deployed on a Royal Navy ship. Yep. Out there. Yeah, that's been kind of quite an important program for the UK. Where are we in terms of number of deliveries and how the entry into service is going with that aircraft?
All of the AW159 Wildcats have now been delivered to the British Army and the Royal Navy. The aircraft is also in service with Korea, and the aircraft has been now delivered to the Filipino Navy. And the like. So the aircraft has been a stunning success. It's a true 5th generation digital helicopter with full network capabilities. So it's the eyes and ears of the fleet. So with its advanced radar, electronic support measures, electro-optic device, we're able to take that tactical picture, whether it be over land or at sea, and fuse that into a tactical plot available to the aircrew. And then that information can then be data linked into the wider joint force. It's a true joint force enabler.
And any other requirements that you're chasing, with that aircraft in particular?
Again, a lot of interest for the maritime variant of the 159. We're also seeing increasing interest in the battlefield variant. Again, focusing on its surveillance capabilities, but also its weapons capabilities as well. So in the maritime, the aircraft is going to be fitted with the Sea Venom heavy weapon produced by MBDA, and the lightweight multi-role missile produced by Thales for the Royal Navy. The aircraft is already fitted with the long-range Spike NLOS missile that's in service with Korea, and obviously it has crew serve weapons for sniper rifles and heavy machine guns for drug interdiction and maritime security operations.
And if we perhaps look at Leonardo's presence in the UK in particular, down in Yeovil, you've got the 159, you've got the AW101. What's the longer-term sort of production schedule looking like down there?
Long-term, we're very fortunate. We've just received an order for the AW101 from Poland. So that's a really good piece of business for us. We're continuing to deliver the Norwegian AW101 helicopters for the Norwegian All-Weather Search and Rescue Helicopter Program. That's the NORSAR program. We're delivering the AW101 Caesar helicopter for the Italian Air Force. That's the world's premier combat search and rescue helicopter. We're also very much involved in the closeout of the weaponization of the Wildcat with Sea Venom and Martlet for the Royal Navy. So yes, there's a lot going on in Yeovil.
And perhaps could you just remind listeners what's the size of the Polish buy and how they're going to be employing that aircraft?
It's 4 aircraft. In the public domain, it will be used to support the naval operations. We can't go into much detail because of certain security classifications, but it certainly will be a major contribution to the Polish Armed Forces' maritime capability.
And I guess the other thing that our listeners would want me to ask, is there an update on the AW609? Are you does that fall into your area that you can kind of give us a sort of brief roundup on where we are with that aircraft?
What I can say about the AW609, it's currently undergoing certification flying. It's based out of Philadelphia Airport in the US, and we're looking very much forward to the FAA certification in due course.
So I guess that's a good roundup in terms of the manned aircraft. Obviously, one of the bigger trends is the unmanned side, and I know you guys have been quite active on that in recent years. In terms of DSCI, in terms of the company activity, any update on the unmanned aircraft?
Absolutely. We've got the AW Hero, which is a 200 kilogram class vertical takeoff and landing unmanned air system being showcased on HMS Argyll. It's being showcased on HMS Argyll because that's where the AW159 Wildcat is, because we certainly see the contribution of the smaller VTOL aligned with the larger manned helicopters as a manned helicopter, unmanned helicopter team will make a major contribution to the operational capability in the maritime, whereby you have the unmanned system undertaking wide area surveillance and for long durations, typically 6 hours, and then it will be then supplementing the manned helicopter, which can then bring in strike capabilities, and typically their endurance is somewhat less. So you put them both together and you end up with a capability far exceeding those of much larger 10-ton class helicopters.
We've seen a lot of military services kind of, carrying out those kind of demonstrations and, working through some of those concepts. Is this a company-led sort of effort, or are you working with, any nation in particular?
We're working very closely with the British government. We completed what was called the Rotary Unmanned Air Systems Concept Capability Demonstrator. That was funded between Leonardo and the UK MOD. That led to us demonstrating the SW4 Solo optionally piloted helicopter. It was remotely controlled in Unmanned Warrior 16, which was the big multi-nation event. We've been working under contract with DSTL and other agencies in the UK to demonstrate teaming capabilities, and we're looking very much forward to significant participation in the Leonardo-managed Ocean 2020 program, which is the very large European Defence Agency exercise that will be run in the Mediterranean towards the end of this year, and then in the Baltic in 2020, where you'll see 48 participating agencies and organisations demonstrating a true open systems architecture, fully integrated maritime surveillance capability with both manned helicopters, unmanned helicopters, surface vessels and unmanned surface vessels. It will be a huge exercise.
And you guys will be providing the SW4?
Regarding Ocean 2020, we'll have the AW Hero operating in that. We'll also have the SW4 Solo optionally piloted helicopter, and we'll also have NH90 helicopters in that exercise as well.
Great. Well, Tony, thanks for your time. Good to see a helicopter as a helicopter fan. Good to see an aircraft on the floor here amongst all the armoured vehicles.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks a lot indeed.
This episode of the Weekly Defence Podcast was brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, Nammo. As always, a big thanks to everyone who gave their time to be part of this week's episode. And for our listeners, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and tell a friend or colleague about the podcast. Until next week, thanks for listening.